This is the final Brewmaster class episode in the series. In this video, we're going to be answering some of the most common questions I have gotten from you guys. These have either come from the series specifically or that I see across my entire channel. Per usual, you can find a timeline down below to skip to any section you'd like. If something isn't being covered in this video, leave a comment down below. I'm either going to do a follow-up if it's needed, or at least I can create a short or something. Without further ado, let's get into the final episode of the series. When to use Expel Harm. So Expel Harm is a very interesting ability. It's going to heal the Brewmaster for a static amount, which is pretty minor, and then it's also going to deal damage to nearby enemies based on 10% of that amount healed. This is a very, very low number, so don't worry about the damage or the healing from this. Beyond that, it's also going to consume all of your current healing spheres, instantly healing the Brewmaster. Since its cooldown is quite short, players often fall into the trap of using it often as like a rotational button. The major problem with using it too frequently is that it costs 15 energy. If you build a bad habit of making it a rotational ability, you'll find yourself energy starved occasionally, which isn't terrible, but it definitely slows down the ebb and flow of the class. Its damage is already nearly non-existent as well, so you're just better off using any other damaging ability like Tiger Palm, Spinning Crane Kick, just not Crackling Jade Lightning. The best practice for this ability is to actually sit on it until your health dips pretty low. Hopefully when this happens, you'll have a capped healing sphere, which should be 5, ready to be consumed. Then when you cast Expel Harm, you're going to nearly be full healed. If you find yourself energy starved or missing out on potential overall damage, normally Expel Harm tends to be the culprit. Instead of casting Expel Harm if you're healthy, try casting something like Rushing Jade Wind instead. So Vivify using. Let's talk about Vivify. Similar to Expel Harm, it's very easy to lean on Vivify as a direct source of healing. Currently, Vivacious Vivification in our class tree causes this ability to become an instant cast after we cast Rising Sun Kick. This buff does last for 20 seconds, so essentially, you'll get a free instant cast every 9 or 10 seconds or so. Unlike Expel Harm, Vivify can actually make somewhat of an impact on players' health bars. In the current season of the War Within, Vivify can critically strike upwards of like 4 mil in some cases, which is a sizable 25% of a heal on an ally, or it can be even more potent when cast on yourself. But when should you actually cast this ability? Now, personally for me, I don't believe you should ever really cast Vivify unless you are all out of other options, or some of your party members need a quick heal before they take damage. While you can cast it frequently, the Brewmaster damage rotation is actually quite packed and loaded, and deviating from that rhythm can actually set you back, resulting in a fairly sizable damage loss or even a survivability loss. I would advise using it at your own discretion, but similar to Expel Harm, casting it too frequently can technically punish you more than it's going to help. The best example though I can think of to use it is on a boss like Speaker Shadow Crown, the first boss of Dawnbreaker. Using a quick Vivify cast on an ally to help remove the healing absorb can help your party member survive. In other scenarios, you might be kiting and you might be out of range and low on health. That is also a fine time to Vivify as well. Basically, only use it when you need it and you have no other options. This tends to be when you're like out of healing spheres and you're kiting mobs. All in all, use it in a pinch. So active mitigation. A common question that I've been getting is related to how Brewmasters are actively mitigating damage, and this seems to be in relation to our current talent build, as we're now foregoing using Breath of Fire, which did and does provide a nice 5% damage reduction. I think a lot of players assume that Breath of Fire is the main way Brewmasters maintain some type of active mitigation, but this is just not the case. The 5% damage reduction is a perk of Breath of Fire, and not the reason a Brewmaster stays alive. Stagger, and more specifically Shuffle, is the main way that Brewmasters actually actively mitigate damage. Just by executing your rotation, you're going to mitigate damage by staggering and then reducing that stagger. Beyond this, by hitting abilities like Keg Smash or consuming Ox Orbs in conjunction with talents like Quick Sip and Tranquil Spirit, you are instantly removing stagger, which is delayed damage. The reason you're staying alive without Breath of Fire is because of Stagger. Beyond that, Celestial Infusion is a new ability that provides 30% damage reduction while it's active up to a certain health threshold that is based on your main stat and of course secondary values like Mastery and Critical Strike. For those who are concerned about losing the 5% damage reduction from Breath of Fire, just pretend you now have a stronger damage reduction replacing it through Celestial Infusion. The key really to mitigating damage is just make sure you maintain Shuffle in combat by hitting Keg Smash and Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick regularly. Obviously there's a nuance to Spinning Crane Kick, but we'll get to that. Speaking of Celestial Infusion, I frequently get asked which of these two are better, Celestial Brew versus Celestial Infusion. I actually recently did a short on the difference between the two, which you may see linked on screen if I don't forget, but in essence, you are going to get the same healing value from either. They heal for the same amount as long as the full absorb is getting consumed. What really matters is the difference in how they are mitigating damage. Celestial Brew on one hand will mitigate damage just quicker. It is a full damage stop until the absorb is consumed, and is better for larger damage stops like a large tank buster or some type of empowered hits. You can treat this like a full damage stop for a few seconds, and this is going to be great in dungeons where healing absorbs exist, like Halls of Atonement or Dawnbreaker in the current season of the War Within, since they're not affected by the absorb. Celestial Infusion, on the other hand, reduces the total damage intake over its duration, smoothing out the damage profile of the Brewmaster, allowing for both the player and party members to react to your health dipping low. Ultimately, you can play either, but often comes down to preference, though it is worth mentioning that the majority of top players are playing Celestial Infusion. So how does magic damage work against Stagger? Some of you actually asked this to explain how this works. There isn't really much to explain here. Stagger is just going to be much less effective against magic attacks, bolts, and damage over time effects. Essentially, when it comes to this type of damage profile, you'll mitigate 58% of what you would normally stagger, which is around 80%. This means that while magic attacks will hit you more directly, it's still going to be delayed. You can also completely nullify magic attacks through Diffuse Magic, which reduces damage by 60% for 6 seconds, but the Yu'lon's Grace passive talent is also a good option for mitigating magic damage. You don't really need to think about how magic damage interacts with Stagger too much, since it's very rarely the reason you're ever going to die. If you maintain Stagger, interrupt what you can, and rotate through your defensives, magic damage and how it interacts with Stagger shouldn't really be too much of a concern. So when should you cast Spinning Crane Kick? This is another great one that I've been seeing. Brewmaster monks have two filler spells. They have Tiger Palm and Spinning Crane Kick. Blizzard has, at least what it's felt like, been moving away from Spinning Crane Kick, and they're trying to put it on the back burner for the last couple of seasons. With the introduction of things like hero talents and spec tree adjustments, you'll notice that great Brewmaster players rarely cast Spinning Crane Kick. If you find yourself playing Master of Harmony, you'll almost rarely cast this ability. The only time you're ever really going to want to cast it is when you're grouping up a large number of enemies that are fairly spread out and you're moving a bunch. But even then, Keg Smash should just be a priority, as well as Blackout Kick, targeting certain mobs in a more structured manner. So essentially, you don't really ever want to cast this as Master of Harmony. Now, Shado-pan, though, makes it a little bit more nuanced. Tiger Palm, baseline, we're going to just throw some numbers on screen. Let's say hits for 400 with my current gear in single target. Spinning Crane Kick deals roughly 130k. This is assuming that there are no critical strikes, or benefiting from any additional buffs. Now in 5 targets, assuming no critical hits, it's going to do 640k. One can draw the conclusion now that if there's 4 to 5 targets, Spinning Crane Kick would be preferred. But when you start to take into account a Blackout combo in Powered Tiger Palm, this is going to hit for nearly 800k, so even in 5 targets, Tiger Palm will tend to deal more damage. Beyond that, Tiger Palm also reduces the cooldown of your brews by 2 seconds thanks to the Facepalm talent. There then becomes this theoretical discussion where you need to decide when damage is more important or is cooldown reduction. Now, without ranting about the specific scenarios you might find yourself in, most of the time there's a general rule of thumb to use Spinning Crane Kick, and these are the scenarios. First, when you're gathering spread out mobs, just to have a little bit of damage on them, this accompanied with Rushing Jade Wind should provide you enough threat until mobs are gathered, until you can Keg Smash. The second scenario is when there's more than 10 targets. Now this is under the assumption that you don't really have a priority mob, and you also don't need the cooldown reduction, because that's where the theoretical aspects come into play. And then lastly, and this is probably the most important one, is you generally want to cast a Spinning Crane Kick immediately following an Exploding Keg while playing Shado-pan, because of the way that Exploding Keg works with its secondary damage profile. The one thing I do want to mention though, that and this goes back to the second point, is that even if there are more than 10 targets, cooldown reduction and priority damage on specific mobs can be more important in some scenarios, but these are the conditions when Spinning Crane Kick should be cast over Tiger Palm. Last but not least, this is a question I get on almost all of my videos, and it's in relation to my UI. I'm not going to break down my entire user interface because there's just a lot to talk about, but I'm assuming that most players are curious about my center Brewmaster HUD. Now, this is a weak orb package that I have put together myself, along with some assistance on the Stagger tracking bar. I've spent a long time putting this together and making minor tweaks to fit my playstyle. over the years of me playing this class. This weak ore package is currently available along with all of my other class and spec weak ores for any supporter of the channel. This is going to include Twitch subscribers, Patreon supporters, and newly added channel members. There are some perks like dungeon weak ore packages as well, private Discord channels, coaching, and more. So if you'd like to support my channel and you want access to this HUD, this is a great way to do so. You can also find plenty of weak ore packages on Wago.io for free. They are all great. Luxthos and Quasi both have some great packages available. My problem with their packages is either they track too much or too little, or like the layout isn't how I want it. And I ended up spending more time trying to fit their package to how I saw it, so I ended up making my own. The same thing could be said for mine though, which is totally okay. There are things that I don't like to track that some people do. For example, like roll charges. I don't track my roll charges because I don't feel like I need to. That's why I think that people learning how to just make basic packages themselves is actually a really good skill to have and something that's worth practicing. I knew nothing about weak ores until I started doing it myself, and it's actually turned out pretty okay. But this is why I'm actually even more excited for Blizzard to keep adding functionality into the base UI, so these types of things aren't required anymore. I like to be able to just play with the base interface, and I think something like Fellowship, for example, did a great job of doing this. So here's to Blizzard hopefully making improvements going into Midnight and future expansions. And those are the most common questions I see across my channel and my Discord. I hope that I answered most of the questions you had about the class and spec. If you have any additional questions that weren't already covered in this Masterclass series, please leave them down below. I may do a follow-up if there's enough, or I may just do some shorts or something. Regarding the Masterclass series, this was the final episode, and I'm very happy with it. My goal with this series was to attempt to be a standalone series that will not just last this season, but will last until the class receives any major updates going forward. In the future, if there are any major changes, I'm going to try to have just dedicated videos that I might throw in a playlist accompanied with this one, but I hope you enjoyed this little project of mine. I know I did. In the future, my hope is to actually be able to do a series like this for even more classes and specs. I have been leaning towards Protection Warrior or Paladin at the moment, but I'm definitely open to suggestions. I've had people recommend Mistweaver and Windwalker, for example. I'm pretty bad at both of those, and I don't think I'd even want myself to tell you how to play it, so we'll see. Anyways, I'm ranting at this point. I do want to give a massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters and channel members who allow me to make content like this. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.